All right, as promised, for our first Friday edition of Cheap Heat, now that we're daily, every day on Ring of Wrestling, I wanted to start out with someone very exciting, and we have the man of the hour, the Honorary Uce Sami Zayn here. Sami, how are you, dude?
Yeah, great, man. Thanks for having me.
I saw you very briefly the other day, and I almost felt like remiss, like I didn't get to even properly express to you how awesome your work has been recently. We talked the last time we did an interview. I just looked the other day. It was March 29th. It was while you were promoting your WrestleMania match, the Johnny Knoxville situation. And that was the last time we talked.
Feels like a lifetime ago, huh?
Yeah, I was going to say, how would you describe the time between then and now?
Good, I would say. It's been a good time overall, I think. The whole past couple of years have been a lot of fun, but the response to this program or this sort of storyline that we've been doing with the Bloodline has been pretty crazy, I suppose. It's like you unanimously adored. It's rare,
dude.
It's rare that you get something like that, sort of universally well liked.
Does that feel weird? Like I can't imagine being a part of something that's universally that loved, because it really is. The internet smart marks, the most annoying fans in the world love it. Casual fans love it. Everyone loves it. Has it surprised even you?
Yes and no. Yes is I guess, a more accurate answer. But I guess what's surprising is that I don't know, just that it's unfolded the way it has. And so I think I kind of said this to someone the other day, and I kind of just articulated it and hit the point, which is not usually like me. I usually have to talk for like a half hour before I say what I mean. But what it is that's interesting and really rewarding for me is that I kind of treat everything I do like it's the most important thing on the show. But this is the first time where it's actually the most important thing on the show. So it's the first time that like my level of investment is returned equally by the fans' level of investment. And that's because I've been plugged on the top of the card with the guy that they're used to investing all their energy into, which is Roman and the Bloodline. So it's just, I don't know. It's awesome. It's awesome to get that level of engagement and that level of investment from an audience.
I love that you put it that way, Sami, because like one thing, I've heard about you with people working with you is that like you're very intense. You're focused. Like they know if someone's doing a program with you, if they have a backstage with you, they know you're going to be focused on what you're doing and you're going to take it very seriously. And so I love that you recognize, just in this case, there's no way to not take it seriously, because it is the moment that as a fan, I'm telling you, that we are waiting for. Like we are waiting to see the Bloodline story. And let's start into this. I've wanted to know from the beginning, how did this start? I remember you first wearing the Bloodline shirt and thinking, oh man, there's a lot of potential here. I highly doubt anything ever happens with it. Just take us through how it started and came to be.
Well, I won't pull the curtain back too much, but the idea kicked around just about a year ago, actually. So it was actually a good 6 months before even the seeds were planted on screen. Because the first time I think there was any sort of interaction with myself and the Bloodline was just after WrestleMania. But in actuality, the idea was first kind of discussed going into Survivor Series of last year. Because I was doing this whole thing where I was on SmackDown. I was the longest tenured member of SmackDown. I was the locker room leader. And I just thought there'd be something really interesting there with the locker room leader and the head of the table. The premise sort of being that, well, the head of the table isn't in that locker room anymore. And he needs eyes and ears sort of on the ground.
Right.
And so it wouldn't have been, I wasn't originally envisioning like being a full-blown member of the Bloodline or anything like that. Just something to where Roman and I can occasionally get on screen together in a sort of lighthearted way. And I'm kind of giving him these reports of what's going on. And here's what you need to be careful for. And every once in a while, I get some things kicked my way too. That was just sort of the idea. Again, that was the the kernel or the little
Right. And
seed.
this was it was a kernel in your brain.
Um, it was I think talked about with Roman as well. I think we were just kind of sitting at catering one day, and I had heard an interview that he had did with Ariel Helwani where he was very kind and towards me, and just saying very nice things about me as an on-screen character and things that he'd like to do something with me down the road one day. And I don't know how we just got to talking, and I really don't remember if it was like I don't remember. I don't remember exactly how it went, but it was a mutual thing.
And did you guys? How would you have described your relationship prior to that moment?
I'd say we've always been very amicable. Um, like he really did take a jump into a different stratosphere when he became the tribal chief. And like again, I'm apprehensive about pulling the curtain back too much.
Do whatever you're comfortable with.
But even with regards to backstage, but there's a very valid reason for this, which is the pandemic, and everybody being very cautious and everything. So like I just did not see him as much anymore.
Right, of course.
When he came back and I came back, and I feel like he was less available, but at the same time, he was also becoming a much, much bigger star.
Right.
So it was actually kind of like a weirdly art imitating life thing, because he needed to take certain precautions and all this stuff and whatever. I didn't see him as much as I saw him, let's say back in 2017, 2018, when we're all on tours all the time and we're all on the same bus and we're laughing all together and all that. But all this to say, it really doesn't matter because it's always been an amicable relationship. We've always gotten along very well.
And what about the Usos? You guys both been around. Same. You all been around for a long time.
Yeah, same. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody who says they didn't get along with the Usos. I think they're about the easiest people in the world to get along with. Really, really great guys.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I think has worked so well for you guys is the way you've turned Uce into a thing. It's like it's such a built-in part of their personality in real life all the time. I mean, that was like one of the things that popped me the most when I first started doing the kickoff shows is that when I'd see them, they'd just always be like, "Yo, what's up, Uce?" And I'm like, "Wow, this is not a gimmick. This is just their life. This is." And
the funny thing is, if you're watching at home and you don't know Samoan people, like I didn't really know a bunch of Samoan people growing up. I don't know what Uce is. You know what I mean? Like I don't know.
In Montreal, people weren't dropping Uce.
Yeah, it's just like not a word in common parlance day to day but they made it a thing that's on TV, and now any kid 6 years old, 7 years old watching WWE be like, "Hey, Uce," and they'll understand that.
So when you turned into the honorary Uce, when that really became a thing, like close to when you switched from the bloodline shirt to the honorary Uce shirt, were you noticing like a clear difference when you came through the curtain? Because I mean, Sami, you've always been an incredibly respected worker, and it's not like you haven't had your moments in high positions on the card with big spots. I mean, hell, your match at WrestleMania with the Jackass guys was one of my favorite parts of the weekend. I thought it absolutely crushed. So it's not like you were doing podunk crap to start out with, but could you just feel a difference when you walked through the curtain?
For sure. And the longer it went on, the more of that I started to feel. And ages ago, Hunter told me this once when I was in NXT. I forget exactly how he phrased it or why we were even talking about it. But he said something along the lines of like, "You're a slow burn guy. You're a slow build." And I think he's kind of right about that. Even when I compare careers like Kevin and I, when we would come up together, I felt like in a lot of places, Kevin was like, he would jump out at you a bit more. And they're like, "Oh, this Kevin guy is great." And then it would always take a minute or two, for them to kind of come around eventually, whether it was the fans or the independents or every time we'd go to a new independent territory or a new company or whatever, 5-6 months down the line, it'd be like, "Oh, this act is really good." And it delivers every time. I think it just comes down to delivering consistently. Like I don't know. It's tough to say. I don't know if I was like, for example, I don't know if you could have plugged me into Roman's spot and I would have been as accepted as Roman. You know what I'm
Right, right.
saying?
Sure.
Like for me, that character arc, you need to kind of watch that progression. And then it becomes a thing of like, man, it's been 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years. Man, this guy's always delivering for the last 6 years. And it's like a slow, steady thing. And it just, the only way to come through it is with consistency. But then being, again, alongside Roman, where the level of investment is 100 always, from the audience and from the company and from just all sides, kind of put the pedal to the metal on that a little bit.
And by the way, it's interesting because Roman, even though he was sort of, from the second he blew up in the Shield, he was sort of on a rocket ship. It's taken him time too. I mean, we know that the reactions used to be very mixed, and now Roman is the most loved he's ever been. If Roman ever turns at some point here into being a full-on good guy, it will be cheers like maybe we've never seen before.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, and I don't know. There's a case to be made that maybe it's like there's no such thing as just plug and play and here's the guy, cheer him now, or here's the guy, boo him now. I think fans need to go, whoa, hang on a sec. Let's see what this is all about. Let me get invested. Take me on a ride here,
Oh, and that's the best part is like earlier on the show, my friend Brian was saying, he made such a good point. We're always obsessed with the swerve. The swerve is great, but sometimes just getting that thing that you're going to get and you eventually get it, like that the hug with Jay, right? I think if you're following this story, you had to assume at some point, hopefully that moment could happen. And yet when it did, I am not blowing smoke up your ass. It was one of the best wrestling moments in years. I mean, collectively, like you could just, I was already back in the hotel just watching on my computer.
Yeah.
It was so awesome. And it wasn't like it shocked me. It was just so damn good. Did it feel that way for you guys? Were you all satisfied with how it played out?
I've been satisfied. Yeah, for sure. I mean, of course, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I watch it back and I'm like, man, I just wish I had the better shot of that, and I wish they had this camera angle. Wish we took 2 seconds longer, so there was a little more anticipation. It doesn't matter. The guy hugged me and the place blew up, and it was 6-7 months in the making, that moment, So this story's been really great because it's been a combination of those swerves and a combination of just being able to enjoy things while you're in them.
Right.
And that's also another fun thing is just watching the speculation of what people think is going to happen next. Or sometimes they get a version of it, even if you think you know where it's going. And even if that's where it goes, you still don't know how you're going to get there.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, even if you watch like Breaking Bad or whatever, you're like, oh, this guy has to go down eventually.
Right.
But you don't know how he's going to happen. You don't know what lefts and what rights are going to be taken to get there. And they executed so well that you're on the edge of your seat and you're fully invested the whole time. So this story's been, I think, one of the most creatively satisfying stories I've ever done, for sure. The only thing that comes close is probably stuff with Kevin, but that's been, a 15-year story.
Right. Right.
So as far as a singular wrestling storyline, I kind of feel like I don't want to say unmatched, but it's very, very unique because of the length of time, and B, the number of characters and the number of dynamics on the table at all times.
It's the nuance. There's so many relationships happening. It's
right.
We were talking about that on the show this week. When was the last time there was a storyline that we were this invested in? And I mean, the things that were being thrown about, dude, when we started talking about the length of time, the amount of commitment, we're talking mega powers. We're talking Brett and Owen.
You got to go back. You got to go back.
You got to go, because even if you go back to the Summer of Punk and stuff like that, there are things that were great, but they were essentially really quick. It happened, it was a thing, and it ended.
Right.
This is what we're always waiting for, that meaningful A story that can drive the show, week after week after week. It's to the point now that normally I fantasize and like start to fantasy book the breakup. And now I'm like, I don't want this to end. I'm going to be heartbroken if this ends.
Yeah. I think everybody will feel that way a little bit.
which is, I guess, also part of the beauty.
Even the performers, yeah. It's when you get something good like this, it's got, I don't know. I don't want to say it has to end. It has to end the same way Roman Reigns' title reign has to end one day. Like, in theory, it has to end, but who knows if, when,
Right. It's hard to even
certainly
imagine.
doesn't have to be. And that's another thing that this storyline's unlocked is the endless number of possibilities. And for you to go, wow, really nothing has to be any one way.
No, exactly.
When I'm coming up with stuff creatively, like this could take a left turn. It could take 3 left turns. It could just go straight. It could do anything. So
well, it's also what makes
I sometimes don't even realize what it is until I start talking to you or talking to people about it. And then I'm like, yeah, I guess this is pretty good, isn't it?
It's wild, dude. I mean, it's the way people are discussing it is so cool. And you talk about the different things that can happen. Even when you think about the Royal Rumble, which is the next premium live event in San Antonio at the end of January, I don't know. Are you guys all going to end up in the Rumble except Roman? Like, is it going to be a bloodline dominant Royal Rumble? Like, there's so many different ways it could play out.
Right, exactly. That's the thing. There's endless possibilities.
And then, of course,
especially now, which is the crazy thing because we're about 7 months deep.
Right.
But it kept hitting these new sort of like peaks because I'd say we really got off to the races in August in Montreal. And that was because it was the first time me and Roman finally, it had been built to for like 3 months of me trying to get in that locker room. And then 1 week, the variables line up. So-and-so's not here. This person's not here. And the dominoes just fall in a certain light. And all of a sudden you're in the locker room. And look, the chemistry was there right from the jump. And that's also what helped. But the fact that there was 2 or 3 months building before Roman and I were even in the same room together, I think helped a lot too.
And now you can't help but think about, at least, fans are thinking about it. Montreal is back on the calendar. Elimination Chamber in February.
Yeah.
Is that a date that has been circled on your calendar?
I mean, for sure. As soon as they announced it, I was I'm excited, but it could have even just been independent of this storyline. If a pay-per-view is coming, or a premium live event's coming to Montreal, I'm excited. I'm super excited. It's been 15 years or something like that. So, and then on top of it, I'm like, wow, we're coming to Montreal and I'm in the middle of this really great storyline. So like, I'm bound to do something really good. And like I said, when we really started going off to the races was Montreal is where it kicked off. Because that was the episode of SmackDown where me and Roman finally got in the same room together. And what I was talking about earlier about the fans' level of investment, Montreal's invested in me the way normal crowds are invested in Roman. I only get it in Montreal. So that's where it was like, I think that amplified everything because I was a star that night. Right. So when you're a star in the eyes of that crowd, that has like a trickle down effect to all the people watching at home as well,
Okay, I want to go through the members of the bloodline and have you tell me something about them that we may not know or that you've learned from working with them. Whether it's a way that they work, somehow they operate, a funny quirk, anything. Starting with Paul E. What have you gotten to learn and know about Mr. Paul Heyman?
So you would think it's a fair assessment to say he's an intelligent person.
Fair enough.
Working with him on this level, I was like, oh, you're on a whole other level here.
Really?
of like, especially strategy and approaching how to approach things and diplomacy and just here's an idea, how to articulate it, how to navigate, how to get certain things across. It's he's been very helpful in sharing a lot of that information with me. How well I'll be able to apply it, I don't know, but he's very strategic, very smart, and he's willing to help. He's very willing to help.
Yeah, it's not a TV character with Paul Heyman. The way he sees the future and it's scary.
No, but he is the TV character to an extent.
Oh, no,
but it's like an even smarter, even more strategic, even more than you would actually expect.
Right. It's not just a gimmick. Let me say that.
Exactly.
It is who he is.
Yeah. But at the same time, there's still a warmth to him and a niceness and a kindness and a willingness to help out and all that stuff that is there.
And also a real, again, don't want to lift it up too much, but from what I can tell, this is always what's fascinating me about Paul with both Brock and with Roman. The TV job that he has, he lives that in a lot of ways. Like he is very committed to Roman the performer.
Yeah, and I've realized that more when I'm kicking around sort of creative ideas, is that his mind is on just as much as mine. And like I would assume I have a valid reason to be this tuned in right now because we've struck something very special. So I'm thinking of all the things we could possibly do. Come to talk to Paul, and he's just as invested.
Right.
Which is remarkable for someone who's been in the business as long as he is, the level of passion that's still there. I mean, even if you don't, for whatever reason, if you don't like the guy, you still have to respect that. The amount of passion and, I mean, it's still on the brain for him all the time. It's pretty remarkable.
Jimmy Uso.
Man, he's easy. He's kind of like, it's funny because these dynamics that we sort of splintered off to with Jimmy and Jay, they're like, there's a certain element, not to say Jay is like the angry one or anything, even though it's a story we've told for 6 months, but Jimmy really is a laid back dude. And that the relationship that we had on screen is very, very similar to the relationship we have backstage. It's not. So there was a funny thing that I just saw where it was a video from, I think 2019 or 2020 of us doing the handshake.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because that's our real life handshake. And then I saw these people like, oh, this isn't just something they did for the story. This isn't just something they're doing for TV. This is their actual greeting that they do in the locker room.
Where did that come from? Where did it come from, the handshake?
Usos have cool handshakes with a lot of people. They're just, like I said, they're the coolest, most universally adored people, and everyone has a rapport with them. So our handshake, I don't know, our handshake also evolved. It started out as one thing and then it turned into something else. But all this to say, that handshake has been our thing for, many, many years. And then it just found its way onto TV. But it's just funny that the fans kind of seeing that, like, oh, this isn't just, they just saw the parallels between the real dynamic between us and the same reflected on screen.
Okay, and what can you tell us about Jay?
Well, Jay, I mean, it's interesting because he's had to portray a different character from Jimmy, but he's similar to Jimmy in a lot of ways, real easygoing, whatever. And again, I'm apprehensive of pulling the curtain back too far here, but it's not a stretch to say he's a very nice guy, a good guy, And I think part of it is reflected by the fact that even though he had to scowl at me and not trust me, he couldn't help but break a couple of times, more than a couple of times. And I think, again, that's the shift between seeing like the real life dynamic and the character, the blurriness between the two. So even if you're watching the storyline and you're like, okay, this Jay clearly doesn't trust him, even though Jimmy does. You're watching this, and when you see them break, you're like, "Oh man, they must get along on some level,
right?
Real life or deep down, like there's still something there, And
it ends up working and feeding the story anyway. These are all the things that make wrestling. That I think why people like you and I, it's like our favorite art form. This nuance can only exist here.
Yeah, but so yes, because the medium is so unique. But the amazing thing to me is like when you start applying, and again, I don't want to use Breaking Bad as an example. And I also don't want to blow too much smoke,
Calling yourselves Breaking Bad.
Well, no, but that we're taking elements of that type of long form storytelling of like a Breaking Bad or Wire or whatever. We're like, here's these characters, here's their evolution, here's the twist, here's the turns, and everyone's kind of a good guy and everyone has their weird moments and whatever. And you kind of understand why each character is acting the way they are. So you're taking that sort of more complex, layered, long-term storytelling, and you're applying it to a very unique medium, which is pro wrestling. So It's like combining a different way of telling stories that we see on TV to wrestling, which already has a very unique way of telling stories, which is through fighting.
But then you also have this extra thing that's crazy about wrestling, which is the idea that backstage exists is part of it's woven in and out of the whole thing. No one ever thinks about the real relationship between Jesse Pinkman and Bryan Cranston, right? But like your guys' relationships on and off camera is a thing that fans think about, and we see it. It's shown, whether it's shown in earnest or not, you see it too.
That's part of what makes it so unique. There's, again, nothing like it in the world, you know?
Okay, what about the guy who I thought the journey we were going to go on was a tag team run for you and this guy Solo Sikoa. What can you say about young Solo?
Well, again, don't rule anything out because you don't know, you know. I did notice when I was seeing all these speculations, and sometimes this is the beauty of this storyline, is you're given gifts that fall into your lap, and you see how the fans react to it in a way that you didn't anticipate. And that Solo thing was a great example because I don't necessarily think that was something that we were consciously trying to lean into. But then the fans are like, "Oh, wait, this could happen."
Yeah.
So you know, that's interesting. But again, a little bit of art imitating life there. Solo is a bit quieter and a bit more. You know, I also don't have the same length of time sunk into the relationship like I do with the Usos, who I've known for 10 plus years or almost 10 years now. I'm just meeting Solo, and he's a bit quieter, and you know, he's still learning the craft and all that stuff. So again, that's kind of reflected in the storyline too, that he's like the strong silent type.
Yep.
Which I think he's still, you know, a good dude and a fun dude and a great smile and all that kind of thing, like heartwarming and all that type of thing. But it just is interesting how, again, the real life, I don't know, demeanor does carry over onto the TV, or that part of the demeanor is turned up a little bit. I think mainly to create a distinction between him and his brothers also.
Right.
You know, because you don't want him to just be the third Uso.
But he is also, I mean, it's interesting because there is a big age difference, you know, and he actually, in our interview, I didn't know, he said during our interview that he hadn't seen Roman in like 20 years. So
yeah, I heard that.
I was
like, just because they're family that like, oh, they're all thick as thieves, but it was really the Usos and Roman who grew up together. And
he's the young one.
Yeah, in 8 years when you're 20, that's a monumental difference, you know?
Yeah. And when your older cousin is playing football at Georgia Tech and trying to make the NFL and becoming a pro wrestler, like there's a lot going on there.
Right, right.
And lastly, what have you learned about the head of the table, Roman Reigns, that you maybe didn't know before?
Well, getting to work with him, I think I've just learned a little bit more about like his process at work. Because actually, like, I've known him as a guy for many years, and it's always been very amicable. But it's the first time I really get to work with him, and especially now when he's sort of elevated his game to a whole other stratosphere, right? So I think one of the things that's impressed me the most is just his poise, you know? And there's kind of no way to learn that but to go through it and get it, you know, kind of like wisdom. The only way to be wise is to live and learn. And he's lived and learned in this business, and it's reflected in some of those on-screen interactions. For example, the one we had at Survivor Series, which I kind of wish that backstage that we had done was on television, just because I think it would have gotten a lot more. I don't know. People would have been able to sit in it a little longer. Mm-hmm. Whereas, as part of the thread throughout the night of Survivor Series, it was a great piece of the totality of the night. But it still got us to where we needed to go. Whereas if it was on TV, it could sit and breathe for a week and people could talk about it, dissect it, and do all that thing. But I was really pleased with that backstage interview where, you know, he's kind of like looking me in the eyes and trying to figure out if he could trust me and all that.
The one that ends with the hug and him looking sort of confused or ominous.
But so if you watch that back, as I did, I mean, he just sat in silence in a way that's very difficult to do, especially in a, you know, pro wrestling backstage. You don't get 45 seconds of silence.
Not often.
Pro wrestling backstage. But he did it, and it played. It played very well. Like each second just made it more agonizing and more intense. And obviously it's not something you talk about like, okay, just sit there for 45 seconds. It's not something
right.
But his poise and his ability and his confidence to hold that moment was very impressive to me. I don't know.
Is there anyone else in the company, outside the company, in the world, in wrestling right now, who you watch and go, one day down the line, I'd really love to get to do something with this person?
Not a ton of God, this is gonna make me sound like I'm becoming one of those old vets. Like it's I see okay, I do see some guys out there. I don't know, MJF pops to mind. I think he's very talented. Um there's one that like strictly in a not like a long-term storytelling type thing, which is where my mind goes a lot. But
Right, of course.
there's a kid in AEW called Dante Martin who's just like
Yeah.
really great high flyer.
Yep.
And it kind of reminds me of the matches I would have on the independents with guys who are really good high flyers. So just strictly based on in-ring, I think just if we were working an indie in front of 300 people,
Right,
that'd be a fun
that
match,
would,
you know?
right.
But a lot of the guys that I you know, it's guys that I've worked with before that I just miss and that I would love to work with again.
Mm.
You know, like Kenny Omega, just as an example. I know I'm listing a lot of AEW guys here, but you know, I haven't seen him in 10 years. That's insane.
Wow.
The last time I saw him was in December of 2012. And you know, I miss him and I miss working him.
Was he super easy to work?
He was a lot like me, actually, I thought. Very detail oriented.
So not easy. So not necessarily easy.
I wouldn't say, like, I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm easy and difficult are very subjective terms, you know?
Well, and there's also two things. There's easy in the ring, which is probably the most important thing. And then there's the attention to detail with everything leading up, right? Aren't those kind of two separate things?
I think so. Oh, for sure. I don't think you'll get anyone, like, the knock on me is not that I'm tough in the ring.
That's what I mean. Like that's what I'm saying.
You know,
right.
That I'm pulling teeth when you're in the ring with me. It's not that. It's that, and again, some people, it depends on a number of variables. I'm not going to get into all that. I'm not going to like sit here and defend my reputation or whatever.
No, and by the way, I think you have a stellar reputation. It's just one that includes attention to detail.
Yeah, it does include some attention to detail because those details, they're kind of everything, actually.
Yeah, I mean, and we're seeing it right now. I mean, literally, it is now paying off with a storyline that I'm comparing to, you know, storylines two over the last 30 years.
I'm drinking this cup of coffee here, okay? And I got it from like some local place and, you know, single origin and it's craft coffee and all this stuff. And I'm tasting like, I taste like notes of tobacco and blueberry and like, it's just a cup of coffee. It's just a cup of coffee, right? So if I get a cup of Folgers, not to sit here and disparage Folgers, but
they make a great coffee. Right.
That's coffee too. But there's a world of difference in the details and in the little subtleties. And you're like, oh my God, I drink this and I go, how is there nothing else in this? It's just coffee. But it's the same thing that's in Folgers. It's just Folgers is just coffee. But like nobody, anyways, I'm not going to get into a whole thing here, but I'm totally getting into a whole thing here. The generalities are not impressive and nobody cares.
Right.
You know, like a wrestling punch, you could be like, yeah, I punch you. And it could look like garbage or it could look like a work of art and just so masterful, look like it totally destroys somebody. And it's all in the details. Well, they're both just punches. Yep. Yeah, but the difference between good and terrible are those details. So I give a lot of attention to detail.
Yeah, well, and I think
sometimes
that's
for the better and sometimes for the worse.
No, I mean, I think it will end with a reputation that is fantastic because those details are the things that work. And the fact is, when other people care, they want to pay attention to details as well. And I think that's all everyone ever wants, right? Is to people to be committed. And that's what I think you're seeing right now in WWE a lot of people who are caring about the details and wanting what they do to be impactful. And I think the result has been a really strong product over the last 6 months.
Yeah, I think so too. I think where I go wrong is maybe the diplomacy, you know, because I'm just, and this goes back years and years, because I'm just like, oh, we're all friends. Anyways, blah, and I just talk like I'm talking to friends, but you are friends, but you're also at work. And there's like work hats to put on and ways of talking. True. To put on, and I haven't always been perfect at that, and I'll concede that. That's
well, you know what? I'm the last one who can give you a hard time for that because I'm very similar. Hey, Sami, I'm not even going to I don't want to I'm sorry, internet. Not going to try to dig into where this thing goes at WrestleMania. We all just have to see the whole thing play out. But Thank you so much for
You
joining
don't
us
even
this
want
week.
me to tell you.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I have friends who are telling me, "Don't tell me. I just want to see." So that's awesome. Let's just, and I don't even have the answers, to be honest with you.
Exactly.
It changes week by week because, like I said, sometimes you get gifts landing on your lap that take you in a different direction. So I don't know. Let's just see
listen.
I want to see where it goes just as much as anyone else.
Well, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. Listen, it's always cool to interview talented people you admire, but when you talk to someone when they're in the midst of this week is an iconic week for Sami Zayn. So I really appreciate you taking time to talk to us today.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure. And the details, man.
The details. That is what we'll take
from this.
All
about.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sami.
Yeah, thanks, bud.